Welcome back to Faith, Family, and Finance. I'm your host, Stacia Williams, and today I am actually joined by a very special guest, a very intentional guest, Dr. Ingenue Cobbinah.
So glad to be here.
Welcome, welcome. So a couple of things before we jump right in, because I know it's always questions about, women, and especially Black women and health. Before we jump into any of that, I want to kind of start back up, and I want to start with your journey and your story, because I think that's important for especially young professionals, medical professionals, to hear. Like, how did you even become a doctor? How did you start your journey?
Well, I'm originally from New Orleans, and according to my parents, for as long as they can remember, I always said I wanted to be a doctor. I don't necessarily remember that, but that's what they said. I do recall by the time I was in middle school, heading into high school, I kind of had that for sure in my mind. I remember doing volunteer things in middle school and high school, trying to head that way. When I got to high school, I definitely got focused on taking all the science and math courses to get ready to go off to college. Back then, I always thought I wanted to be a pediatrician, but everybody, I think they go through that phase. I ended up going to HBCU. I went to Xavier University in New Orleans, which is known for getting African Americans into medical school. So that partly was one of the reasons why I went there, but also more importantly, I think I went there because I got a full ride.
Okay.
Money was important. My family was considered poor back then, and finances were an intricate part of choosing where you were going to go to college. I got accepted to other colleges, but Xavier gave me a full ride. So that's where my parents said, you got to go there. 4 glorious years at the HBCU. I was a chemistry major, pre-med.
Okay.
Sometime during, I think, my sophomore year, there was a convention that came to New Orleans that related to medical schools across the country. And I happened to go, and I met one of the administrators from the University of Pennsylvania, which is located in Philly, at that convention. And she was like, hey, when it's time for you to apply to our school. I never dreamt of going to a place like University of Pennsylvania. It's an Ivy League school. I thought I was going to end up going to like LSU or Tulane, because those were the schools that were close to where, to Xavier. But I applied. I applied to actually multiple schools across the country, but I applied to University of Pennsylvania like she told me to, and I got in, which was a shock because New Orleans, as you know, is warm.
Yeah.
Philly is cold.
Yeah. So I want to take a pause there, because one of the things that you said, I think that, so I too that's why sometimes I say I vicariously lived through you. I too wanted to be a doctor growing up, and I wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a model. And somewhere along the lines, I got sidetracked. I think it was the biology classes. But one of the biggest things, and I think for most people, most kids that are coming through school and wanting to be a doctor, pursue that dream, is the financial aspect of it. And so I heard you mention that you got a full ride. Was it an academic full ride, or was it?
It was an academic full ride.
Okay.
I was that nerd in high school. I didn't do sports. I was in the student council. I did those kinds of things, but it was an academic full ride. I will say that at some point in high school, I did think about doing something else. I actually thought about being an engineer, and I applied to engineering programs as well. And I even actually applied to the 6-year medical program at UMKC here in Kansas City.
Okay.
And I actually got in.
You did?
I did. And
that's a hard program.
I know. And you would think that, given the fact that I knew I wanted to be a doctor, why I opted not to do that. It was all about the finances. It still was that. My parents were, you have to go where the money is.
Oh, wow.
Because, they I don't know necessarily that they were afraid of debt, but they also understood what debt could mean.
Yeah.
For myself and my siblings, because I was the oldest and I still had 2 siblings coming after me, and my parents wanted all of us to go to college. And I think they had to factor all of that in.
That
and
definitely
making
had
that
to be done.
decision. So while it would have been quicker to go to UMKC's medical school, in the long run, I had to go where the money was.
Yeah.
It was the right decision. I had no regrets. It was
Well,
absolutely the
obviously.
right decision.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard. I think you have to keep that in perspective, that your dreams might be difficult to get to because of finances, but you can't let that get in your way.
I like that.
There's always when there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
I also felt blessed because people helped me along that journey,
Yeah.
making sure I knew about things I could have applied for, scholarships I could have applied for. And that's why I do try to tell students that there are scholarships available for a multitude of reasons. And
So-
you have to use whatever resources. If you are an athlete, I say take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you are involved in debate and there are debate scholarships, take advantage of whatever is going to get you a little step closer to where you're headed.
And I think that what you just mentioned, as far as not allowing finances to get in the way of your dream, I think that goes for students as well as for parents, even everyday adults, is we oftentimes get distracted by the money. Oh, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost that. But if it's something that's within you, I truly, truly, truly believe, as you said, a way will be made. But for high school students for today, and I'm sure some things have changed.
Yeah.
Where should they start? Who should they reach out to? Because guidance counselors, I think we've had this conversation before, are not really guiding like they used to.
No, they're not. But I do believe that there are programs that exist that are trying to introduce us to those things. There are organizations in Kansas City that are looking for students that express an interest in healthcare or any specialty. Not when I say specialty, I'm talking about law, I'm talking about teaching. There's all of those things exist.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to go out there and look for them. I think the thing that we have to encourage students to do. Back in my day, we did not have the internet.
Listen.
Okay. The internet's right here.
Yeah.
Get on there, type in that little search engine what you're looking for. You'll be surprised how many programs will come up or pop up that are out there.
Yeah.
For parents can do that, the student can do that. You have to ask. You have to be willing to go and look for what you want.
Right.
It's not gonna just drop on your doorstep. If you're lucky, it might, but it's just not. I think that is so important, that you have to be out there seeking the knowledge, asking the questions. And while guidance counselors have so many students that they're trying to actually provide services for, be the person that stands out. Show up in their office and ask them.
Go look.
Go looking.
Yeah.
Because when they have 400 students that they're trying to take care of.
Yeah.
I understand it. But if you were 3 of the 400 students that are constantly on the doorstep banging and asking questions, that guidance counselor has no option other than to try to help you, hopefully.
I agree, and that makes a lot of sense. So you ended up at University of Pennsylvania,
in
Ivy League school.
Ivy League school.
Listen,
without a winter coat. That first snow was a shock. And I actually got accepted to their MD PhD program. One of the things I did not mention was
MD PhD. Okay.
When I was in undergrad, I actually did research, and so I applied to their MD PhD program and got accepted as a part of that program.
And you just kind of glaze over all these accomplishments, because UMKC's 6-year program, you can't just walk up to them, or you can't just apply and get accepted, just so that to put that in context. You were really kind of glazing over these accomplishments that's a big deal. It sounds important.
But that was like 30 years ago.
It don't matter. It still sounds important today.
A long time ago.
MD, PhD program. Okay.
So I get that.
Okay.
Start off, and I'm not, you say it's accomplished, but I'm not going to lie, it was a struggle.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly struggling in the genetics class, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
This is hard. Like, am I really ready? Am I an imposter?
Yeah.
You know, I actually had those thoughts like, am I really supposed to be here?
So you felt that when you say, or when you asked if you were an imposter, you felt that because there was struggle or because it was hard, that maybe you didn't belong.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that actually mean that give you all the more drive, like I'm supposed to be here?
You know what? Sometimes I did feel that way, and then sometimes I didn't.
Yeah.
It's I will say, having gone to HBCU, that definitely helped inspire and give me that background to, along with where I went to high school. It kind of gave me that family, that surrounding to know that I am definitely capable. But that was the first time that I actually became aware that I could fail. And, you know, because, well, I failed at a few things along the way, but that was the first time it really meant that truly, if you fail, what do you do next?
So what did you do?
You know, I get 2 years into the program. It's also at the break point where you could step away to go start working on your PhD. And I chose to do that. I actually took a year, started graduate school, realized I hated it.
Ain't nothing like getting into something.
Yeah, I realized I
realizing
hated
ain't
it.
for
And it
you.
was like, okay, I'm not getting a PhD.
Yeah.
And then I started having second thoughts about even being a doctor, because there's that point. And I think that happens to all of us along the journey of wherever you're going, where you start to think, okay, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Part of that was because I realized that I did not want to be a pediatrician anymore. I had done my pediatrics rotation and realized that I was miserable because I didn't like taking care of sick kids. Taking care of sick kids just was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I knew I was not going to be able to go to work every day and watch the potentiality that a kid might die.
Yeah.
Even though that might only be a small aspect of what we did, that just was not something I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. I realized that I liked surgery, and that was not at the top of the list of things that I ever thought I would ever do. So I actually went through a phase during that year of graduate school. I was like, okay, maybe I should quit and just go be an engineer.
So, in other words, you were thinking about giving up on your dream.
I was.
So what was it, or what advice too? I mean, because this is your first 2 years. And
First 2 years
to become
in,
a doctor, how many years is it?
It's 4 years of medical school, typically 4 years of residency.
Okay.
And I'd already gone through 4 years of college. So
Okay.
I was 2 years in, technically almost 3 years in, about $50,000 in debt because medical school was I had to do loans. And I really was thinking about quitting. And my parents were like, oh no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And my dad actually suggested that I do a rotation in Ghana in West Africa, where he's from. And my medical school actually was like all for it. They encouraged us to do things like that. And so I started this process of doing a rotation, getting the information together to do a rotation in Accra in West Africa and Ghana.
Okay.
And I do it. I get all of the paperwork together. I fly over and I do, I think it's a 6-week surgery rotation. Loved it. I was like, oh my God, I can't do anything else but go back and be a doctor.
Now, did you love what you were doing, or did you love where you were doing it at?
It was a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
I think what really did it for me was understanding that medicine in other parts of the world was not necessarily medicine in the United States.
I've heard that.
And it just, that spark that why we do medicine came back. There was a point where, even though I was a medical student, there were a couple of things I remember distinctly having to do. I had to go get blood from the blood bank. And, you know, here, there's people, runners and all of that stuff. You know, the blood bank is within the same hospital. It's not like a mile away. And I remember being in the OR and they're like, we need somebody to go get blood. And they handed me a cooler and they said, you need to go. And it was literally a mile away.
And
I had to walk that mile with the empty cooler and come back with the cooler. And
all while they were operating.
And I had to do it fast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is crazy, but this is medicine.
Yeah.
Anesthesia there is not like anesthesia here.
What do you mean?
So, here you just show up for your surgery and the anesthesiologist turns on the gas, gives you your medicine through your IV, and you have your surgery. So for a regular hernia repair there, if you want anesthesia for your procedure, your family has to go to the pharmacy, like a drugstore, like a Walgreens or a CVS, buy it and bring it to the hospital for you to have it. At least back then that's how it was. This was like 1991, I believe.
Okay.
So there were a couple of procedures where all the patient bought was some lidocaine.
To make it through surgery?
To do for the surgery. And they had a stick where they put a stick and they would bite down on the stick. I know this is crazy.
That's a different kind.
I know. But that experience taught me there's a place for me. Yeah. There's something for me to do. And I know that that's not what we do here, but there's still that need, that role, how those patients looked at us, even though I was a medical student, looked at us as providers, that respect. It was just a different feel that I had not necessarily felt. And I'm like, okay, I got to go back.
So so you got all of that over there. And I actually was talking to a young lady not too long ago, and she was talking about her experience. She recently went to Africa. And take Africa or another country just outside of the United States. And she talked about there's a different feeling of gratitude that people tend to have.
Yes.
And, when as American, when we go over there, in some countries we're prejudged because of this sense of entitlement that we just naturally have, that it's instilled within us because we're American. And she talked about, how long were you there? And then when you came back, knowing that the medical system, and I'm not in medical school, I've never went to medical school, but just knowing what I know by way of hearing, how did you go from that feeling to making it over here with how we operate?
So I was 6 weeks. I don't know, I was naive. I was young.
Okay.
And I think that young and foolish.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that triggered when I went. I went to a place where I was not a minority, I was a majority. And so I think that actually feeds you a little bit too. Okay. I was accepted. I was given that respect, even though I was a medical student, that the patients that you took care of were very grateful. Just for the little things that we take for granted here, but getting immersed in that for 6 weeks, working with other medical students, working with the physicians that were there, it felt empowering.
Did your imposter syndrome go away?
Oh, it went away completely.
Yeah.
It did, because for once I was surrounded by people that looked like me, taking care of people that looked like me, providing care to people that looked like me, and just getting told, you can do this. Yeah. Like, not only could you do this, but you could be really good at it. Yeah. Not that I wasn't told that here, but it's just so different. Yeah. And then so when I came back, I'm like, I got this. Yeah. I'm like, this is what I am meant to do. Yeah. I really had that feeling. And so I get back, all I had to do was now figure out what it was I was going to do. And if you had asked me, before I started medical school, would I end up being an OBGYN, I would have told you, God, no. It's the most disgusting thing ever. And so ultimately to choose this as my specialty was a big deal for me. I initially thought I was going to do internal medicine because I knew I wasn't going to do pediatrician, and that surgery was, you kind of have to understand a little bit back in that time that surgery was a male-dominated profession, and so almost all the surgeons that I interacted with were white male providers, and so that was a little bit of a struggle for me. And so I just thought I was going to be internal medicine. I loved infectious disease, but when I did my internal medicine rotation, almost all the patients I took care of were HIV positive, and I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life taking care of HIV positive patients because back then we didn't have any major treatments. This was 1992, 91, 92. So that I was like, that's not for me. I did my OB rotation at a rural hospital in Pennsylvania, GYN rotation at the main hospital in Philadelphia. And I realized that, oh my goodness, this is something I'm actually good at. And people actually kept telling me I was good at it. And I realized I liked it. And what I tell medical students now is choose your specialty based on what you believe is the worst day of that specialty. Like pick the thing that you hate the most about that specialty and imagine yourself doing it all day long, 24/7, the worst day. If you think you can do that, then that's probably the specialty for you.
That's life. You just gave the formula for finding purpose.
Yeah. So for me, it was having to do pelvic exams 24/7 over and over and over again with people that really were just miserable. And I'm like, I can do that.
So I want to take a pause and educate audience. So there are, first of all, a lot of people that don't go to the doctor. In general.
Yes.
Okay. So as women, we not only go to, you have your primary care physician.
Right.
Okay.
You should.
And then, but an OBGYN, what does that stand for? And then when should a woman see an OBGYN?
So OB stands for obstetrics, which is the care of the pregnant patient.
Okay.
The GYN is gynecology, which is the care of women, just in general. For most of us, gynecology starts at the time that patients hit puberty, so around 11 or 12 till the end. Most of us do both, OB and GYN. There are specialties that are just related to OB, and there are specialties that are just related to GYN.
Do you know, I thought that was all the same person.
Yeah, that's not unusual.
Okay, now it makes sense now.
So within OB, there's a high-risk OB specialist that's called maternal fetal medicine, and they happen to just take care of OB patients. And within gynecology, there's Urogyne, which deals with bladder issues, prolapse issues. There's GYN oncology, which deals with cancer issues within GYN. There's reproductive endocrinologists who deal with infertility issues. So there's a whole wide range. A lot of females actually consider us to be their primary person. But as a general rule, I still tell patients, once you probably get past 40 to 50, you probably need to have a separate provider that you consider to be your primary care. A PCP provider. But for most women, from the time that they're about 18 until they get to their 40s, we might be the only provider that they see. Because if you don't have any other major health issues, we can pretty much take care of that basic stuff. But if you have diabetes, hypertension, those type of other health issues that can be found within our community, you probably need to have a primary care provider to help manage that.
So if a young woman calls and she needs to go to the doctor, she's 18, she needs to call and ask for just the GYN if she's not pregnant.
No. When they call, they just need to, the typical word that they use is they want a well woman exam.
A well woman exam. Okay, all right.
That's the bread and butter of what we do, well woman exams. So I personally, I'm okay with patients starting at 18. We don't do, it's mostly just to educate. We talk about sexually transmitted diseases. We talk about female health, what their cycles should be like, maintaining good, healthy weights, just everyday things that they should be aware of. We don't usually do that first pap smear until they're 21.
Okay.
Now, do I see girls younger than 18? Yes. I will have girls as young as 12 or 13 come to see us because they're having problems with their menstrual cycles that their primary care providers, pediatricians, don't feel comfortable taking care of.
Okay.
So most 18-year-olds, when we see them, the reason why we're seeing them is because they've aged out of their pediatricians.
Okay.
Because most pediatricians will turn them over or tell them they need to find another provider at either 18 or 21.
Okay.
Some pediatricians will hold on to them till they're 21 if they're in college, but others will be like, nope, you got to go find someone else. And so for a lot of girls, their natural inclination, partly because that's where their mom pushes them to, is to come see us.
Okay. All right. So, and we're going to, throughout our time together, you will see her back several times because we're going to address a lot of those issues that we're talking about, specifically for Black women. But before we go there, so you decided on being an OBGYN.
I did. I had a great mentor. She, Helen Dickens, remarkable woman. She was actually at Penn at the time I was there. She had an impact on me, and she was like, this is something that you could do. And that was important to me because a part of me wanted to be a general surgeon, and I was afraid. Even though I had all of this sense of being successful and I could do it, there's still that fear of choosing to go into a specialty where I could be the only one a lot of the times. And I'd already been the only one in a lot of environments along the way. But a lot of us African-American females tend to do OB. There was some familiarity there. And with her, Dr. Dickens, as well as another doctor that I'd come across who was a maternal fetal medicine doctor, Dr. Samuels, he was just like, you could do this. He was like, this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Mentorship. I want to pause real quick because so you found your mentor. Did you find your mentor or how did you find your mentor? Because I know a lot of women that struggle even with that. And whether it be they're in medical school or they're in whatever their profession is, just when did you know that you needed a mentor or did it kind of happen naturally? What did that journey look like?
Well, this is one of the things I will say I have to give Penn, my medical school, credit. They were all about mentorship. So that was something that they really encouraged their professors to do, their instructors. They encouraged us to seek out people. They encouraged us to identify people as we went through our rotations that we could relate to. So I think that was just the environment that we were in. And so that helped nurture that. But it can be a struggle. It can be something that I will say that once I came to Kansas City, which was almost 15 now, it's a lot of years after that fact, that was hard to do. Like that's not, unless you go seeking it out or finding it, it can be hard to find a mentor.
Do you have any advice, especially for young medical students? Where should they start? Where can they start?
I know it sounds crazy, but start with what you know. So if you have a physician that you have actually seen, even though they may not be in the specialty that you were thinking about doing, if it's your doctor and your doctor takes the time to talk to you and has encouraged you about what your career that you're seeking, that's a mentor. So your mentor could be right there and you just don't realize it. A mentor is each mentor can serve a different role. One can serve a role where there's encouragement, providing information. Another mentor is a person that actually allows you to come follow them around. A different mentor actually tells you what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. So I think it's not just about one. It could be multiple different people that serves different roles, but you have to be aware of what's going on around you so that you can see that. And you can't be afraid to ask people for advice. They may not, they can choose not to give it to you, but if you don't ask, the answer is always no. That's something that I truly believe. I tell people all the time, if you don't it's gonna be no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are actually doing it to yourself rather than having them do it to you. So ask.
Yeah. And I think the assumption too, when you talk about, especially like the younger generation is, well, I don't want to be a bother, or I don't want to, because in all fairness, like.
I do.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, and I'm like, bother me. I'm like, but let that person make that decision for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't make it for them.
Yeah.
So I do see that happening. I hear that a lot of times, and I'm like, well, why would you take that attitude?
Yeah.
And I don't know why my generation feels differently about that. I'm not sure if we were just encouraged to do that a little differently. But I do feel like as young women today, we have so many things at our fingertips and disposal. Ask. Don't make the assumption. Maybe that's part of the problem, is that you guys have so much that you feel like you can't ask, when in actuality, in order to get the best use of what you have around you, you have to ask so that you can actually use it well. Because what I feel is happening is you're not using it well at all, because you're not actually taking advantage of understanding how to use it the right way. So yeah, Dr. Dickens, Dr. Samuels, they were there. They told me. They encouraged me to which programs to apply for residency, because that's the next step after medical school, is you have to apply to residency, which is also very competitive. And actually, in a lot of ways, it's even more competitive because it's different, because you have to go through what's called the match.
Okay. I've seen that. That's a big deal.
So it is a big deal. So how the match works is you apply to different programs across the country. And after you apply, you actually have to make a list where you rank the programs you want to go to. Okay. And the programs also rank the people that they want.
Yeah.
And so the place where you're ranking has to want you as much as you want them. And so if you're lucky enough, you get your first choice because your first choice wanted you too.
Yeah.
But if your first choice didn't want you, then that list starts to go down, and you get either your second or your third or your fourth choice. So what ends up happening on match day is when you find out where you go, who wants you.
Yeah. What happens if nobody? I mean, is that possible?
It is definitely possible where if you interviewed at 6 places and you didn't make the list for any of those 6 places, you go what's called unmatched, and so then you get into what's called a scramble, where you start to try to find a place that has an opening where they didn't match, because there's certain places where people interview where they may not have actually put that on their list, and so a hospital may have ranked 6 applicants that they wanted, but if those 6 applicants didn't rank them, or the people that they ranked ended up matching with somewhere else, then their match list is left empty too. So you scramble for the remaining spots.
How long do you have to find a school?
It's been so long, I forgot how the timing of when we did it, but I know it happens around St. Patrick's Day is when the match comes
and you have
out.
to be matched by the start of the...
No, so there's an actual day. So that's when you find everybody at the medical school comes to the auditorium, you get handed your envelope, and we all find out at the same time where you've matched. And then if you don't, then you immediately go into that process of scrambling to find a spot.
Okay.
So my top places back then were Ohio State and Columbus, and University of Pittsburgh, McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh. Those were my top 2. And I went back and forth over which one I would put. And I put Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh first, and I matched with University of Pittsburgh. So I got my first choice. So go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is awesome. I loved working at McGee Women's Hospital. The experience I got there, just it made me the doctor on top of everything else that I'd already experienced. It just added to who I am.
Now, what's the like? I guess what's the demographic makeup for the area that you're serving in? Are you serving women that look like you, or are you serving Like, who are
No,
you? Okay.
not back then. I would say University of Pennsylvania was in the inner city of Philly. So
Okay.
you do see as you were doing all my medical school rotations, you did see patients that looked like me. You get to Pittsburgh, definitely not as many African Americans,
Okay.
but Pittsburgh, where I trained, also served rural parts of Pittsburgh, that part of Pennsylvania, and
Mm-hmm.
also served rural parts of West Virginia because West Virginia wasn't that far.
Okay.
But again, not a whole lot of people that necessarily looked like me, but it didn't matter.
Okay.
You know, there was when I remember when I interviewed, there was one Black resident, which wasn't necessarily, I take it back. There was one Black resident that was a senior resident. The year ahead of me, there were two or three in that class. So by the time I got to Pittsburgh, if I recall, I think that there were either 3 or 4 Black residents, which was a lot because most of the places that back then,
Yeah.
you have to remember, this was like 1993, 1994. Most programs were lucky to have 2 to 3, let alone 4.
Oh, wow.
By the time, during my time frame there, my class had 2 of us, 2 or 3. So there was 2 or 3 in my class, 2 or 3 a year ahead of me, and then there were 4 in the year behind me. So what ends up happening, which is very true, is that if you have African American residents, you're more likely to recruit more African American residents.
Okay.
So that tends to build. So because when you're interviewing for places, you want to go where people seem to be having a good experience and where you know that they're going to be people that look like you.
Gotcha.
So during my 4-year times at Pittsburgh, it was awesome because we had quite a few of us, and there were 9 residents each year. So if you have half your residents in a class, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that look like you.
That look like you. So we were doing pretty good.
Okay.
And I interview places. I remember interviewing at the University of Iowa for residency, and it was like, okay, great program, but I can't come here. I interviewed for the University of UMKC, which is Truman and St. Luke's, and the guy that interviewed me told me, "Don't come here." He actually told me I was too good to come.
Really?
Yeah, he did. He did. He was like, you're like, why would you come here? And I'm like, well, my family lives here. He was like, you're way too good. You need to go somewhere else. And I respected him for that. Actually, it turns out years later, he ended up delivering my baby.
Oh my goodness.
And I actually asked him if he remembered that he had told me that. I interviewed at the University of Kansas. Was not necessarily a good experience, so I knew I wasn't coming here, which was kind of sad to me because University of Kansas actually had quite a few minority professors, and that kind of threw me off that I didn't have a good interview experience.
Okay.
But in the end, I ended up where I was supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Had a great experience, but don't get me wrong. One experience I had, because you mentioned to me earlier before we started this about microaggressions. I remember one microaggression that took place when within the first week, my first week of being a resident. You have to understand, residency in some ways is a little bit like pledging, where you can get a little bit
literally
hazy.
getting ready. Yes.
You get hazed a little bit.
Yes.
And you have, when you're a first year resident, the job of the upper residents is to basically terrorize you.
Right.
And there's supposed to be this level of respect that you're supposed to give everybody above you. And I'll never forget. So during my first week, it was a 3rd-year resident kept mispronouncing my name. And, because we're residents, we don't call each other doctor. We just call each other by our first names. Well, she just would not say my first name correct. Just wouldn't. And I felt it was intentional. And only one. All the rest of the residents would say my first name, be cool. Finally, after probably about the third or fourth day, we were standing at a nurse's station, and I turned to this other resident and said, hey, if you cannot say Ingenue, you're going to need to call me Dr. Cobbinah. And she looked at me and was like, excuse me?
I love that. I love that you went up.
And she was like,
you're going to have to promote me if you can't get my name right.
Yeah. And she was like, well, don't you have a nickname?
Oh.
And I'm like, my mama named me Ingenue. And like I said, if you can't say it, you need to call me Dr. Cobbinah. She was like, you have some nerve. I was like, I do. And it's either Ingenue or Dr. Cobbinah. I did get a little bit of a reputation as being a little uppity.
Because you had a standard? Because you required?
But let's put it this way. She eventually figured out how to say my first name.
Of course she did. Yeah. Of course.
But that's part of the process. That I view that as a microaggression. I view that as putting my line in the sand of saying, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be the best doctor I can be.
Yeah.
And I can get the whole hazing thing.
Yeah.
But there's a point where mispronouncing my name is a little bit more than that.
So, with the whole microaggressions, then versus then and even now, I mean, because you're still practicing.
Oh, and it still happens.
So it's one of the things of mental health. What advice would you give to someone who's in the space dealing with those microaggressions, and whereas they might not have figured out a way to overcome those microaggressions, what advice would you give to them to help them overcome?
It's kind of sad because I see more and more patients that are experiencing that in the workplace, and it is affecting their mental health. And I'm trying to figure out what made my generation a little bit different than this generation.
Because mental health issues have always been there.
They have always been there. And I'm not sure if we've just internalized it in my age group in certain ways and just to figure it out, hey, you just got to keep getting up and going back.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there are some of us that have just basically said we're not putting up with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I think back what I did in residency, that was probably the time in which I started to get massages and facials and a lot more self-care.
Yeah.
Before that point, I don't know that, well, part of it was probably because I couldn't afford it, but because my residency job was sort of the first job I actually had where I started to make a little bit of money.
Okay.
But that is probably that was the first time that I actually did truly get into self-care, really doing things to separate myself from that constant work environment. I did get massages back then. I did go get pedicures back then. I got facials back then. So it was
Did you
different.
feel guilty? Were you ever made to feel guilty? Like if you're, so I guess if other residents found out or.
No, because all of us were kind of doing it.
Okay.
I mean, actually, I think that was actually why I started doing it, because one of the other residents said something about it.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, let me go try that.
Good for y'all. Because,
Let me go try that. I think that we had good, my residents, we were good friends. We did things together.
Mm-hmm.
We socialized together. I have to give my program credit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they chose a good group of people that interacted well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That generation, that the provider, the physician that was the microaggression was a different era of people, because the class of people that was like the class right ahead of me, my class, and the class after, we would have never done anything like that.
Yeah.
The administration started focusing on picking people with certain qualities, and I think that made for a better environment. That by the time that I finished that program, I felt proud that we had the diversity of the residents that we had. I can't say that it's necessarily like that now just because the administration's changed, but I think when you're in a place, you have a responsibility to try to make it better for everyone else. And so be involved. I mean, before I left Penn, I worked on the admissions council. When I got to Pittsburgh, I was interviewing people that were interviewing for residency. So I got involved because I felt like that was a way to ensure that we brought the kind of people there that would make it hospitable for the people we're looking for. It is hard.
Yeah.
I don't know individually, you know, if your work environment is that hostile to you, you got to get out.
Yeah.
You got to get out. If you can't figure out a way to fight back or have the support that you need, then it's not good. And I know that may be easy for me to say because financially you may have to keep that job.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you're that trapped in that work environment, then you have to, again, find your resources, find whatever you can outside to empower you the strength to keep going back every day.
Yeah.
I feel like I've just been surrounded by remarkable women in my life because I think about my grandmother and when I used to hear her talk about her work environment and, you know, she definitely lent on her faith and she lent on her friends.
Yeah.
But she also was a little bit outspoken.
Yeah.
You know, she, when I think about the things that she said she did when she was at work, I'd be like, now I'm like, she did what? And I know she did it. But I also know that she knew how to pick the place, time.
Yeah.
And she figured out who her allies were.
Part.
And I think that was the key is like, I have to believe that at this time and day and time, and I know it's hard, that we have allies.
Yeah.
But it may take a while to identify them, but we got to believe that we have them. And if you don't, then you really owe it to yourself to really be trying to find somewhere else to be.
Yeah, because I think that in any environment that you're in, you have to learn how to be strategic. You have to learn how to, I always say, play chess, not checkers. And I tell my children that. And because here's one thing that you can't just every time something ruffles your feathers, every time something's uncomfortable, you can't run
for the door.
You can't. You absolutely cannot. So you have to, and I think that when you talked about your generation and generations before, it almost became, number one, you knew that you couldn't run because if you just run, you're going to keep running. So you knew that I think the generations before yours even is, no, we're tired. We're going to stay and we're going to fight. You're going to treat me with respect. They demanded respect. I think that some of the issue with the generations coming is, number one, we don't respect ourselves. So if I don't respect myself, or I'm willing to compromise myself for money, for to get ahead, whatever that looks like, then how can I require for you to respect me? And then it's just like a spiraling downward.
It is spiraling. And I think the thing is, so we have to remember, you know, in the 50s and 60s, if you left from here and went to there, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you were going from you were just jumping out of the fire plane right into the fire.
Yeah.
Here in this day and time, it is true that you could leave from a bad situation and find a better situation.
Yeah.
But even if that is the case, that better situation still requires you to bring something to that, to bring an improvement to it, to also, I think you owe it, if you're leaving a bad environment to go to a better environment, the way that better environment stays better is that you have to bring something good to it. You have to actually keep bringing, you have to keep that going.
Yeah.
Because eventually if you don't, it's just going to resort back to what you left from.
Yeah.
So you have to build on that. It is hard. I have no doubt, but we also have to hold ourselves accountable. I'm not saying that we bring things onto ourselves, but we also have to look internally to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to be the best version of ourselves, to allow ourselves to get to where we're trying to get to.
Absolutely. My mother always said, you teach people how to treat you.
Exactly.
And for whatever reason, you know, like, and I've always applied that. I know what I require. I know how you need to treat me for you to get whatever it is that you need or you want out of me. And I stand on that. And sometimes it comes across as, oh, why are you so combative? Or I was in the barbershop earlier today with Grant. And one of the references, one of the words that a man used, he said, you know, well, you women, you're just so combative. I said, opinionated or combative? Do we have standard that we're not willing to go against, or combative? So I think that knowing how you want to be treated, you need to be treated to flourish in that environment. I think that that is a huge thing. So it starts with you when you talk about self-care.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
And I try not to get upset when people say that they're afraid of me. I get that all the time.
No,
in
not
my work environment. I do. And I've asked, and I'm like, is it, you know, a lot of it is because of the way I carry myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to shirk down. I am going to walk into a room like I own it, whether or not I own it or not. But I will walk into that room. And I think I've learned that over the course of 35 years of doing what I do and being a physician, that if I don't walk into a room that way, I'm automatically disrespected.
Yes.
So I can't let the other people in that room have the upper hand before I even have a chance to open my mouth.
You're absolutely right.
So that is the way I look at that, because I do find myself a lot of times being sometimes the only woman, definitely the only Black woman in rooms that I enter. And so that is important to me, that I give myself as much of an advantage as I can. And I do that by walking in there like I do on the place.
I agree.
I feel like that's the case. And so that has got me a long way.
I was just talking to a young lady the other day, and we were having a conversation, and she's established in her field, but she was saying that I want more. And she was making a certain reference of a type of lifestyle. And the reference, if I'm just being very candid, she said, I want to live like a rich white woman. And this is a young Black woman. And I said, sweetheart, you don't want that. What you want are the privileges that come with being a white woman. And I said, and not saying that those women, even of whatever race, don't have their own battles, because every woman does have her own battles, but understanding what she was trying to communicate to me and looking deeper, I said, first of all, what do you require when you walk into a room, what happens? What's the first thing? Do you shrink? Do you go hide? Or do you go, I said, because when I walk in a room, exactly what you said, I walk in a room and the first thing I do is identify, okay, who is the most important in the room and what do I need from that most important person in the room? I never walk into a room feeling like I am the most important person in the room. I walk into the room knowing that I am one of the most important people, but I observe and I figure out what is it that I require, what is it that I need, and I act accordingly. A lot of times as women, we're taught to shrink. We're taught to be quiet. We're taught to, just listen. No, we have to show up, know what we want, and we have to communicate that, and we have to go look for that.
We do. I feel like that is a thing that we get kind of inadvertently, subconsciously told.
Yeah.
And what I will say, there are times in my profession where I feel like I get treated a certain way, not necessarily because I'm Black, but I get treated a certain way because I am a woman.
A woman, yeah.
And so
That's enough.
and so you get both. You
Yeah.
get both sides.
Yeah.
And so I do. Like when I walk, I don't, we have this tendency to sometimes walk in a room and there's a table. We'll take the chairs that are along the back wall rather than going straight to the table. I'm like, I'm sitting at the table.
At the front table.
I'm sitting, and if you're not careful, I might be sitting at the head of the table. So I don't have any problem walking, like you said, walking up to the person I know to be in charge and introducing myself.
Yes.
Now, was I always that way? No,
Right.
I don't think, and I'm trying to sit here trying to think at what point in time did I begin to realize that that's who I was? Probably once I became truly finished residency, got here to Kansas City, trying to maneuver my way through the medical community here, and realized that they only listen to the people that speak up.
Yeah.
They really only listen to the people that actually have some presence.
Yeah.
They only listen to the people that are willing to actually do the work.
Yeah.
So
that part too.
That's the thing. It's like, I'm not always necessarily the leader. I'm not always necessarily a good follower either, but I definitely am a person that's going to put in the work.
Yeah.
So, when they ask for somebody to come come serve on this committee or that committee or this committee, I'm there for it.
Yeah.
And so after you serve on enough committees, then they're like, oh, she's dependable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, she's knowledgeable. She has the experience. So when there is a point where somewhere along my first 10 years in Kansas City, people begin to go, okay, we can ask her, we can have her do that. Or, so when St. Luke's East opened, which is one of the places where I work at, when we got to a certain point and they needed someone, they could point to me and say, hey, you're a person to come and help with that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, is you have to put yourself in a position to be recognized, so that you know that you deserve it.
Yeah.
And they also know that you deserve it.
Yeah. Because before you have anything, before you make a dollar, before you make any type of impact, you have your reputation, you have your integrity. Those are things
that's what you build on.
That is exactly what you build on. And those don't cost you. And just showing up because I said I was going to show up, that doesn't cost you anything. But that goes so far. But like you said, you have to be willing to show up. So you finished residency. You ended up. How did you get back? So determined to come back here?
No.
Okay.
No, that was not necessarily on my bucket list of things. I ended up back in Kansas City. My parents actually moved to Kansas City while I was still in high school. And when I finished residency, they were like, "Oh, we really want you to come back or come to Kansas City." And so coming to Kansas City actually presented an opportunity for me, because I needed a way to pay back my student loans that I had generated from medical school. I owed somewhere around $90,000. And I joined up with the program that paid back my loans by coming to work for Swope Parkway Health Center.
So, okay, because that's a big thing. Right now, there's so much talk about student loans. There's so much talk about, we want the current president to forgive them. So that's a real conversation.
It is a real conversation.
Are there programs out there that?
Yeah, there are programs out there. So there are a couple of things you have to know about me. Is one of my family was big about paying off debt. That, I don't know why that got so instilled into us, but it was instilled into me. So when I was a resident, I actually started paying back my debt. Although you could delay paying your debt back until after you finish residency, I actually started paying mine back while I was still a resident.
So what did that look like for you?
It meant
specifically, like you just started making payments.
I started making payments.
Okay.
So I didn't defer.
Okay.
Which I had the opportunity to defer. They tell you can defer because you're going to be a physician. You can defer. I chose not to defer. I chose to start making those payments. And that hurt a little bit. But
Did y'all hear that, y'all? That is being financially responsible. Yes. Okay.
so it hurt a little bit.
Mhm.
And I paid, that interest that they started paying down a portion of the principal. They allowed us to moonlight, which is take an extra job in our last 2 years of the residency. So every single dime that I made on my extra job went to paying back my loans. So by the time I finished residency, that $90,000 was down to $70,000.
Okay.
And so I get to the finish, and then there's a program that's set up, and the name is escaping me right now, but there is a health service core program where if you choose to work at an Indian reservation or inner city community clinics or any places that have a hard time finding providers, if you work, you can take a portion of your income as well as an additional amount will get paid towards your loans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I did that for 2 years and basically wiped out the rest of my debt.
That was probably the most worth it. 2 years.
It wasn't at the top of my list of things I enjoyed, but that was also the first time that I actually got to serve patients that the majority of the patients look like me.
Do they still have programs like that?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They still absolutely do. There are loan forgiveness programs. They're set up in all various types of ways. Some private employers actually have it as well. So there are definitely loan forgiveness programs.
Okay.
But it does feel like you're selling your soul for a little bit. But it's not the rest of your life. I mean, most of them are either 2, 3, or 4 years. Some of them are up to 5 years. You just got to know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your choice. I mean, the military is the same way. You can go to the military and they'll pay back your debt. You just got to know what you're signing up for and be willing to do it. I worked for Swope Parkway. It was not my dream job. It wasn't.
If you know Swope Parkway, I can understand.
It's not my dream job, but I met some really good people.
Okay.
I met, some patients that are potentially still my patients to this day.
Okay.
I made some connections, and and I paid my debt off.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much. I mean, when you think about the fact that there are potentially doctors that I finished medical school with that are just now finishing up paying off their debt, and I paid off my debt within 8 years of finishing medical school, I can't quite beat that. Yeah. Because it put me in a different position financially than other providers. So that was a strategic decision. After my 2 years with them, I actually joined a private practice, and I stayed with that private practice and became a partner and owner for 17 years. Yes. So that was earning my respect, paying my dues, doing my thing.
So one of the things that, because earlier on when we were talking about one of the doctors, your mentors, you mentioned, or the one that told you not to come to Kansas City, you mentioned that he actually delivered your baby. Yes. And I think that it's important that when we talk about successful women, like you are a successful woman, I mean, I don't have to say anything else to add to that. You are. So a lot of times I hear, and even this is something that I lived through too, balancing, so you had your daughter. When did you have your daughter? Were you out of medical school? Were you? Yeah.
I was here in Kansas City.
Okay.
I had been in Kansas City for 5 years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years. I got married, got pregnant, got separated, had a baby, got divorced.
Yeah.
There's no, I tell all my patients, if you're waiting for the perfect time to figure out when you're supposed to start a family, you're never going to start a family.
Did you feel like you had to choose? Because
wow, that's a hard, you have to know this about me. I always wanted to have a baby. Like I had names picked out when I was still in high school.
Yeah.
I know that's crazy, but I probably was dreaming of that, husband, 2 kids, a picket fence, but
Did you really?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
You can still, I think, let's be clear about something. You can still want to be Superwoman.
Yeah.
And all those things, and still have that little girl part of you.
Yeah.
That wants to be a mama.
Yeah. Yeah.
That wants that thing. I don't think they can exist in the same person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That definitely existed in me, and I'm not going to say that didn't play in my mind a little bit when I was in college. Didn't play a little bit in my mind when I was in medical school or residency. There was always that thing: is it ever going to happen? Because I wanted that. Yeah. And it happened, but it didn't happen exactly the way I dreamt it was going to happen, but it happened. When it finally does happen, you have to realize that when it doesn't go according to the plan you dreamt, that you have to be willing to flex and change and accommodate and become something different.
And see, I think that's where a lot of women get stuck. And when I say get stuck on, they're not able to, where you're able to pivot. I know that knowing myself, I'm able to pivot. A lot of women feel like if I'm not married by this age, if I don't have a baby by this age, if I don't have this career status by this age, and I don't know if that is pressure that we put on ourselves.
It's pressure that we put on ourselves.
Okay,
it is.
We have to.
It is, and I see that all the time, and I try to tell, you can't, especially now, you can't box yourself in. Yeah. I have patients that will say, I don't want a baby unless I have a husband. I'm like, well, that's fine. Yeah. That you can totally have that mindset, if that's the way in your mind. But if it's really, really important for you to have a baby, you really want to be a mom, you may have to realize that you're going to have to think outside the box a little bit, because the husband part may never happen. Yeah. And if that doesn't happen, are you going to be okay with the final point of there not being a kid? Because if you're not, then you need to start thinking about, am I going to adopt? Am I going to foster parent? Am I going to do artificial insemination? What are you going to do to get to whatever it is that you want? Be realistic about your goals. Yeah. And, while I would have loved to still be married, that was not the right thing for me at that point. It wasn't working out. It was the right thing for me to walk away from a bad marriage. I never dreamt I would be a single parent, but I became a single parent. I'm like, God put me, said, hey, this is your situation, figure it out. And I was blessed enough to have a grandmother, my parents, my siblings, the people that I worked with, my community supported me to get to the point where I am today. And I'm forever thankful and feel totally blessed by the fact that I was able to be a single parent in the job that I had, because it was not easy to be. I mean, I was on call. Yeah. I did, I had a horrible call schedule for a period of time when my kid was little, and thank God for my parents. Yeah. At one point I had to hire someone to be a driver for my daughter because I couldn't be everywhere. And thank God for that young lady, for being that support for me. But there was also certain things that I knew that I wanted. Like, I knew I wasn't going to actually hire a nanny. Like, I'm like, I brought that child into this world. Yes. I'm not going to, there's nothing wrong with nannies. Don't get me wrong, because my daughter actually nannies kids right now. But it was just something it was important to me to be that parent, because that's what partly also that was my dream. I'm like, I'm going to be a mama. Yeah, I'm going to figure it out. So I just changed my schedule to accommodate what I wanted for myself. And what I wanted for myself was I wanted to be able to drop my kid off at school every day. Yeah. I wanted, when I wasn't on call, to be able to pick her up from school every day. I wanted to be the person there to do her homework with her when I could be there to do her homework with her. I wanted to go to all of her extracurricular activities if I could. Now, did I make 100% of them? No. Did I probably make 75% of them? Yes. I was there. Did I volunteer? Yes, I did a Valentine's Day party, Halloween parties. I was not the room mom. Yeah. But I was that parent that showed up for a party or two and brought all of the whatever activities that they needed to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it all,
Yeah.
but I did what I could do. I figured out a way to be a mom that was present.
Yeah. Yeah.
That my daughter could appreciate.
Yeah. And you recently just came back from an annual trip that you take with your daughter.
We do an annual trip every year. It does work.
So even though, again, you couldn't, accepting that you couldn't do it all, I just want women to, one of the things that you said that I feel is very important is, you said community.
Yes.
For some reason, we isolate ourselves. When we need help, I feel like for some reason, most women isolate.
Well, don't get me wrong. I isolated too.
Yeah.
I was very
but why is
private
that?
because I didn't want people to know I was struggling. Because I had this persona or this image that I felt that I needed to present.
Yeah.
And then I began to realize that was probably not a good thing. That, especially given what I do for a living, being a caregiver of women, that I didn't necessarily have to tell every woman my story or my struggle, but I also knew that it probably was not good to make it seem like that I wasn't a single mom.
Yeah.
Like, that they needed to see me as a single mom. They needed to see me with my failed marriage. That, like, to say, hey, it happens.
Yeah.
But we do tend to try to keep private. And as a general rule, I am a very private person. I do tend to keep my professional life very separate from my personal life. And I like it that way.
Yeah.
But I also realized that what was also happening while I was keeping that professional life over here, my personal life was also very small and very consolidated. And that was not really good either, because I was sometimes afraid to ask for help. I also didn't want my parents to feel that I was using them.
Yeah.
And taking advantage of them. And because that's that sense of like, they gave me everything.
Yeah.
And here it is, they set me up to be successful.
Yeah.
And here I still have to go home to mom and say, hey, mom, I really need you to babysit.
Oh my goodness. And this is obviously our first time having this conversation, but that's one of the things, again, I'm repeating how many times, replaying in my head, how many times I've had this conversation with other women and why we don't ask for help.
So ultimately I decided, okay, I can't do this if I don't have their help. It's too hard.
Yeah.
And not be good at it. So I just was like, okay, I'm gonna have to pay you.
There you go.
So,
that's always an option.
Yeah. So I paid my mama gas money.
Yeah.
I did things for my dad. Like I did the things that I knew that they would appreciate and not be like trying to make me take it back.
Yeah.
Because that's how our parents are.
Yeah. I don't want that.
They don't want that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I'm gonna have to try to do this in a way where it's a part of just how we are as a family.
Right.
And my dad would ask for these crazy things. I'm like, he didn't really need that, but you know what? I'm gonna get it for him.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. Figure it out.
Man, you got 4 TVs at your house and you still want me to get you another TV? I'm going to get you another TV.
Just because.
I'm just going to get you that just because TV because you asked me for it.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why you need another one because there's only 2 of y'all in there and each one of y'all already got 2 TVs apiece. But I'm going to get you that other TV because that's what you want.
Yeah.
So...
But ultimately,
that's how you have to work it.
You appreciated them how they wanted to be appreciated.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't try to have them take what I was giving unless it was something that they wanted.
Yeah.
And so if they said something in passing, like my mom said that she liked something in passing, and I'm like, and I got it for her.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, you didn't have to do that. I'm like, I know I did.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's my way of giving back to you, to say thank you for all of those times where you, at the last minute, I'm calling you, I'm like, I need you to go get Isabel.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I need you to go do this for me.
Yeah.
And
but that's important too, that right there, the appreciation of your community. Because I've heard women say, well, nobody wants to help me. My first question to them is, Well, did you ask? And if nobody wants to help, sweetheart, are you burning bridges?
Yes.
Like, do people feel like
They
that
can't
you're
help
using,
you.
like they can't help you, or that you're going to take them for granted? Because if I'm helping you, if you ask me, hey, can you go pick up, like the kids? Absolutely. But even when I ask my parents, because I have to ask my parents for help as well, because like you, I told George, I don't want to hire a nanny. I want to pick my kids up as much as I can.
Yeah.
So, but when I ask my parents for help and I say, okay, I'm very specific of, I need help picking up, and then this is what happens next. I will be there to relieve you of, or you can drop. Don't, oh my gosh, this is a break. And you going to the grocery store, you cleaning the house, you doing everything, knowing that you still got to pick up your kids. You're taking advantage of your system.
Yeah.
So,
if I'm going to the grocery store before I pick up my kid, I'm calling my mom and saying, hey, I'm here at the grocery store.
Do you need anything?
Do you need anything?
Yes, absolutely.
I was notorious, like, go to Costco. Hey, Mom, I'm at Costco.
Yeah.
You need me to pick up you some stuff?
Yes.
I'll run it by your house when I'm done. Like little things like just like that you don't necessarily have to do, but you do because it's an acknowledgement of the community that we're in. Absolutely. I mean, I distinctly remember, so my nurse that, when my daughter was little, she was like 3, I think. I was going to a conference in Hawaii, and I asked her if she wanted to come. Like I said, you can come. And she was like, why? I said, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm doing with my daughter. Yeah. So come along. Yeah. And it's like, this was a long time ago. Yeah. But she and her family were a part of my community that allowed me to be able to do what I was doing. Yeah. So I didn't have to do it, but I asked because I'm like, hey, this is something that lets you know you're a part of this community.
Because for me, like, so I was a single mother with Anastasia. And I know for a long time, I got stuck in the bitterness, the anger, the resentment of the fact of at the parent that wasn't there, that didn't have to be at school by a certain time. And because I was so stuck there, I didn't realize all the other help that was around me, because I was so set on, no, you're the other parent, you need to help. And so for me, I want women to realize that, okay, the other parent is there. And if they're present, if they help, good, great, wonderful.
That's on them.
Yeah. But if they don't, you still have to figure it out, because the more you try to push for that other parent to help, the more angry you're getting. The only person that is getting taken out on is that child. And I was guilty of that with my oldest. And it took me a while to figure it out. Thankfully, I figured it out.
So I was a little older, so I think that had a little bit of an effect on me. Yeah. I also remember my brother saying to me one day, don't wait for that. Yeah. Yeah. Don't wait for that. He was like, if you keep waiting for that, you're gonna be waiting a long time. Yeah. I don't know why he ever said that to me, but he was right. But it wasn't for the lack of me trying, because I did try for a little bit of time to try to involve her father, but but there was a point in time where I just was like, okay, it's me and her. Yeah. I'm like, and I'm gonna make the best of whatever it is. It's gonna be between me and her. And I think that that probably hit me when she was probably 4 or 5. Yeah. Where I was just like, I gotta do this. She's getting ready to start school. This is my life. Yeah. Yeah. That is when we started doing the whole mother-daughter. We literally we would do a mother-daughter trip every single year, just the two of us, and we're still riding that. Yeah. And I think that was important along the way. Oh, for sure. To do that. And we have a great time. Yeah, I know. I saw the pictures. I saw the post. So as we kind of come to a close for this episode, I want to kind of talk about some things that in the future that we're going to be talking about, addressing. So what is one of the things that if you had to talk to the audience in bringing awareness as far as
your professional responsibility of, okay, I'm a doctor. Let me give this piece of advice to you. And it can be your medical journey, if speaking to somebody that's in medical school, or it could be, okay, as women, this is what we need to do. What's one piece of advice that you want our audience to walk away with?
Oh.
Until the next time.
Until the next time.
Yes.
You know, that's a loaded question.
I know.
I think just to kind of capitalize what we're talking about today is, those dreams that we start off having when you're, high schoolers trying to figure out where your life's going to lead you. First off, don't get caught up on that, because what you think at 18, by the time that you're 28, sometimes seems totally prophetic. And other times it seems, oh my God, that was totally ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life is ever evolving.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to evolve along with it. But still maintain the core of who you are.
Yeah.
Some of my closest friends joke with me that I've been serious for as long as they can remember me. And I have a hard time sometimes seeing it. But then again, there are days when I'm like, yeah, you know what? I have been kind of serious my whole life. I've always been purpose driven.
Yeah.
Always, putting a goal in front, reaching that goal, getting the next goal. So I think it's really important to know yourself, believe in that, who you are. Don't let people get in the way of that. Find the people that can support you along that on your journey, and just keep pushing. Yeah, just keep pushing, and ultimately, you'll get there. Yeah, you will get there. And it is a journey. Don't think it's a little road trip, because it's not a little road trip. It's truly a journey to get to where we are. But believe in yourself, stick with it, and you'll be okay. Yeah.
Words of wisdom. And I think the words that we can all walk away with. I'll definitely remember the words, and I'll apply those to my own life every single day. Well, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Faith Family Finance with our guest, Dr. Ingenue Cobbinah. And so, again, join us in the following episodes, because we will have more of these conversations surrounding women and health. Yeah. And then, too, just what is like the life of women, life of successful women. So, if you haven't already, be sure to like or subscribe to our channel and stay in touch. All right, till next time, take care.